All right, good evening, everyone. We are calling the Planning Commission to order on today, May 14th. Commissioner Sherrick, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
You could stand and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Meamber, can you have the roll call, please?
Yes. Chair Armstead,
Here.
Commissioner Daly,
Here.
Commissioner Lopez,
Here.
Commissioner Ivan Garcia, Commissioner Flores,
Here.
Commissioner Carrascos,
Say my name.
Just say here.
Here.
Commissioner Sherrick,
Here.
Commissioner Orlando Garcia.
Present.
Vice Chair Quill is excused and Ivan Garcia is absent as of now.
Okay, as long as we have a quorum. Okay, we are now ready for public comments for items listed or not listed on the agenda. A 3-minute limitation shall apply to each member of the public who wishes to address the Planning Commission on any item on the agenda, excluding public hearings. There is no limit to the number of items that may be discussed within that 3-minute time limit. Ms. Meamber, do you have the administration of oath for our public speakers, if we have any?
I have the oath, but I also have not received any public speaking slips. Is anyone here to speak?
Okay, okay. Therefore, let's continue. Consent calendar. The next item is the consent agenda. Consent items are routine in nature and may be enacted in one motion. All public and non-public hearings will be open at one time. Any item may be discussed separately upon request of a member of the Planning Commission or a member of the public. Does staff have any updates to the consent calendar? None?
None, Madam Chair.
Is there anyone wishing to speak on the consent calendar? None? Okay, then may I entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Madam Chair, if I may interject.
Yes, sir.
There is a presentation on the Harris Building donation to the city.
Okay, thank you,
So
sir.
if the Planning Commission would want to hear that presentation, we have our Deputy Director for Economic Development here this evening to provide you with a presentation. And there is an action the Planning Commission would need to take at the end of his presentation so that we can move this project
Okay.
forward.
Please go, please, sir.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So this evening, the City of San Bernardino is placing before you all for your consideration a resolution to adopt finding conformity with the general plan. It's specific to 300 North East Street, otherwise known as the Harris Building. I have prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation to highlight some of the key topics. Item number 2 is Resolution 2024016. And just a brief history on the Harris Building. It formally opened in November of 1927, has been a staple in the community for a very long period of time. It was remodeled as late as 1973, where it became a anchor store in the Central City Mall, or the Carousel Mall. El Cortes Ingles, the current owner, acquired the property in May of 1998 and has retained ownership since that time. The building has largely remained vacant since 1999, when Gottschalk's formally closed their doors. There's been many efforts to restore tenants in the building, and there's been many efforts from El Corte Ingles to actually place that building on the market for sale, and none have come to fruition. So the purpose of this evening's item is to find compliance with Government Code Section 65402, and it pertains to the general plan or a part thereof. It specifies if a general plan or a part thereof has been adopted, no real property shall be acquired by dedication or otherwise for street, square, park, or other public purposes without first being submitted and reported upon the Planning Commission as to the conformity with the said adopted general plan. So the goal tonight is to review the property donation and issue a finding of conformity with the general plan. The property is located within a CR2 zone in the city, which basically specifies several purposes or uses. They include local, state, county government, administrative, educational institutions, public open spaces, residential and/or senior housing, restaurants, financial establishments, convention facilities. The planning staff has also found that in accordance with CEQA, the proposed donation is exempt from CEQA, and this activity is not a project as defined under section 15378, and is covered also by the general rule that CEQA applies only to projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment. And just strategic goal-wise and objective-wise for the city, this aligns with key target number 4, economic growth and development. Obviously, this is going to be good for the city to retain, increased site control of the future development associated with the Carousel Mall site, and it's going to just it's going to provide a community benefit overall. So we're pretty excited to have this to present to you all for your consideration. So at this point, staff recommends you adopt Resolution 2024016, finding conformity with the city's general plan and finding that the project is also categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question was there a financial analysis done to know what the long-term effects on the city's finances are going to be from the donation of this building?
Any analysis that's been done was just pertaining to the donation or the transfer of getting it under city control. There's ongoing efforts to explore the long-term and short-term costs. The city hasn't yet decided what we're going to do with the building, so without that in mind, we don't really know what the long-term financial implications will be.
Has this been designated historical site or not?
Officially, I don't believe there's been talks of it being a historical site, but I don't think it's actually undergone the process of being dedicated or determined to be a historical site. Lynn, can you confirm?
I don't remember if it's on the National Register or the State Register.
I don't believe it is.
I'd like to make a motion.
Second.
Excuse me. Chairperson, just need clarification what the motion is for. And I'd like to remind the commission that this item is part of the whole consent calendar. And so if you wanted to, you can move all of the consent calendar.
I would have to abstain from the consent calendar because of the draft minutes for a meeting that I wasn't present at. So I'm happy to rescind my motion if somebody else would like to make the motion to approve consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar, including resolution 2024-016-PC.
I'll second. And no. Chairperson, just before voting, just one more time for the record, if you could ask if there's any public comments on the consent calendar. Now you can call for the vote.
Chair Armstead? Commissioner Daly?
Yes?
Commissioner Lopez?
Yes.
Commissioner Flores?
Yes.
Commissioner Ivan Garcia? It's for both the minutes and the real property donation.
Yes.
Commissioner Carrasco?
Yes.
Commissioner Sherrick?
Yes.
Commissioner Orlando Garcia?
Yes.
Vote passes unanimously.
Next, public hearing.
Madam Chair, before we go on to the public hearing, I'd like to make a few introductions to the Planning Commission of some members of our staff who are actually in the audience. We have Ms. Rochelle Clayton, who is a Deputy City Manager in charge of Community Development and Parks and Recreation and Public Works. She's sitting right behind me. And sitting right next to her is Mr. Lynn Merrill, who is the Public Works Director. I don't know if most of you are familiar with Mr. Merrill. There he is. So just a little housekeeping stuff.
I think we should also introduce our new commissioners.
Oh, yeah, I was going to actually welcome the new commissioners in my director's remarks at the end, and
Oh,
then we can have some time to actually, talk a little bit about, either one of you and that kind of thing.
So
So,
we'll wait, okay.
yeah, we'll wait to the end. Thank you.
Okay. Next, public hearing items. We do not have any this evening, so there is no need for a translator. So we are now ready for the discussion item.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Azam Jabshe. I'm the city engineer. Tonight, we're going to talk about in-lieu fee and fair share contributions on development projects in the city. What I would like to start with is what are fair share contributions and then in-lieu fees. But before we get to the nitty-gritty about the specifics of each, how do we get to that point? There is something called Traffic Impact Analysis Report. TIA, we call it TIA, basically is a specialized report study that determines potential traffic impacts of the proposed developments. But before we get to the TIA, we have an initial stage of review process, what we call the scope. Scope form that should be completed by the consultant developer. And then based on the scope, we can determine if it warrants moving into TIA. What warrants a scope moving into TIA? If the daily trips of that specific project, if it's commercial, if it's warehouse, exceeds 250 daily trips in and out. Or in the peak AM or peak PM, we get 50 trips, either in the AM or PM. So if those thresholds are met, then we condition the developer consultant to submit a full-blown traffic impact analysis report that will study the entire area where that development is taking place. What are the review process when we do the TIA review? Basically, we'll have the developer pay a fee. It could range from $4,000 to $5,000 for the, it's about 500-600 pages in the TIA. And then the review is conducted by an on-call consultant that the city hires. Initially, traffic division used to review the TIAs. And then typically, typical review is three reviews. Sometimes if the TIA is really well prepared, we can review it and approve it on the second review. Once the TIA, what is in the TIA basically? Basically what, it's the impact to the intersections that we need to mitigate through improvements. And then based on these improvements, we develop something called conditions of approval. You've probably seen them when we come in and present items to the commission on a monthly basis. And these conditions of approval will encompasses these improvements will take into place like improvements at signalized intersections, adding left-turn pockets, doing signalization, installing new traffic signals. So that will be the conditions of approval that we bring to you at the Planning Commission level. There is two types of fees that we collect at the end of the review. There is something called fair share contribution. What is fair share contribution? Let's say development is coming in an intersection and they're adding a left-turn phase or increasing the left-turn pocket or installing a signal. If those mitigations are essential to improving the traffic condition at that intersection, then there's no fair share contributions and we'll condition the developer to implement these improvements at these locations. And we've done it at many locations throughout the city. Give you an example, we have Waterman and Valley where the new charter school went in a couple years ago. On the north end of town where we have the travel center that's gonna be going on Palm and Kindle. We conditioned them to install traffic signal on Palm and Industrial, which is west of the 215 freeway. So there is a balancing act that we do between fair share contribution and having conditioned the developer to implement them. So on opening day, all these improvements will be in place and there will be no traffic impacts. And that will conclude my presentation. I'll have Susan Pan, Land Development Manager, talk about in lieu fee collections.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Susan Pan, the Land Development Manager. Today I will be discussing the in lieu fees portion of this presentation. So the in lieu fees is called for under certain circumstances. So first, cannot we get to the conditions of approval that Azam just mentioned? So for certain, depends on the project type and the existing condition, certain off-site improvements may be required. So that will include like roadway widening, and that's generally per our general plan, and the street pavement rehabilitation, sidewalk, curb and gutter, traffic signal, and traffic signs. In the case that when it's not feasible to perform these off-site improvements at the time of the development, we can reach an agreement with the developer that they will pay an in lieu fee, which will be the equivalent of the cost it will take to make these improvements. So they pay a fee instead of making those improvements at the time of development. Give you an example, such as roadway widening, but oftentimes we may have just like one single parcel or lot that will be making the improvement, but then the rest of the street is still at its current roadway width. So it actually may create a hazardous condition that we just widen the roadway for this one parcel of land, instead of the entire street. So that will be a reason that we don't make, the roadway widening improvement for a particular project at the time of development, and we cannot take the in lieu fee to so that in the future, sometime that we will be able to make the roadway widening for the entire block of the street, where it's appropriate. So the cost of the in lieu fee is calculated based on the quantity and unit price of the type of improvements required. So for example, street rehabilitation, depends on the square footage and the type of, improvement, asphalt, concrete, how many inches of the pavement and the base. So that's how it's calculated. Then the next slide is talk about how we use this fee. So first of all, there is government code, section 66,000B. That's about Mitigation Fee Act. So that is the basis of the government code that we can levy, such kind of in lieu fees in order to mitigate any kind of, roadway infrastructure improvements required for the development. So these in lieu fees will be used to fund the capital improvement projects that are located at the same location of the development project location. So for example, this project is located at this address, on E Street, for example. So when the time arrives that we have capital projects to rehab the entire street, or it could be several blocks of that street, E Street, then we can include this portion of the development site, because usually it's just the frontage portion of that development that will be required, for the developer to improve. But that can be included in a larger capital project. So that's how it works. And then the city, by law, can hold on to this fund until there's enough money to finance these capital projects. So there's, that we work in collaboration with our capital projects team to see, what kind of projects they have going on and how it can incorporate, this particular portion of the development improvement in the capital project. So there's definitely a nexus between, the development in lieu fee projects and the capital projects. And we do, by law, also will be preparing every 5 year a report to account for any unexpended in lieu fees. So we'll keep a nice tracking spreadsheet to keep track of all the funds we collected and how we spend them. And these funds are all deposited into trust accounts with our finance department. Yeah, so this concludes my presentation. Any questions? I will be glad to answer with Azam.
Any questions?
I do have a couple questions. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's greatly appreciated. The in lieu fees that are how are they decided? So if a project is given the conditions of approval and the developer looks over the conditions of approval, it comes to Planning Commission, we approve the conditions as they are, as they come to us. When is the developer's, asking for the in lieu fees as opposed to following what's stated in the conditions of approval?
Okay, so it could happen at potentially different stages. Ideally it would be during the planning DERC phase, that when they, see the conditions and see there's a problem with it and bring it up. So, the city staff can discuss with them and try to work it out. So oftentimes like roadway widenings, and that will be the time that we can discuss to see this is really not feasible to do it at this time, then perhaps an in lieu fee can be considered, and then we can calculate what that amount is going to be, and they can agree upon it, and then they actually give us a check, and then we can deposit it into our trust account. So, but in some cases that it does happen like later in the project delivery phase when they run into problems like power line undergrounding, and that often is the cases where when they see the challenge with power line undergrounding, and then we may also try to reach an agreement at that point as well.
So when it happens before a project is constructed, can the Planning Commission get what that financial dollar amount is going to be as part of that condition?
I'm trying to think, because that will be in the conditions of approval, part of the resolution to be approved by the Planning Commission.
And when it happens after Planning Commission has approved it, does it come then back to the Planning Commission for reapproval after a condition has been changed?
Well, okay, so if there's a change with the approved planning conditions of approval, then we will bring them back to Planning Commission, that if there's a change.
Yes.
After fact.
So Planning Commission has the final approval after that condition has been changed.
Correct.
It's done at the commission level?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sherrick, let me just provide you some clarification. Typically, when projects come before the Planning Commission, they would come with a resolution, and a resolution would have conditions of approval attached to the project. Now, depending on the magnitude of the change in the condition would dictate whether or not it does actually come back to the Planning Commission, because sometimes changes could be made for a design flaw, for example.
Yes.
And, bringing that back to the commission will be somewhat of a burden. Now, we're just changing the building height by 2 feet, or we're moving the building back. But if it involves fiscal impacts, like, and I'm not even sure whether or not we can actually know what the exact cost of some of these improvements would be at the Planning Commission stage. So when it goes through a plan check, and then it goes through all the construction analysis and so on and so forth, we'll be able to come up with a firm dollar amount. If I understand your question clearly, you're asking whether or not we would know what those dollar amounts would be at the time the project comes before the Planning Commission for approval. And the answer is maybe, it depends. There are some fixed fees that we can let the Planning Commission know about, but when it comes to other fees that would come through, the actually submittal vetting stages, staff wouldn't know what those costs would be until after, it's gone through a review process. So if that's what you're asking about, that's what I think your question is.
Thank you. I think it's a fine line between getting the development that the city needs, but also building the infrastructure that
Structure.
the city also needs.
Right.
And that's where one of our concerns, my concern as a planning commissioner is that
Yeah.
while our development is building, the infrastructure is being built to keep up with it. And the concern that I have is when we are accepting the in lieu fees and scheduling these projects 5 or 10 years out, our infrastructure is lagging where the development is. And so that's just a concern that I
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner Sherrick, yeah, especially when it comes to paying fair share, for example.
Yes.
You know, I mean, you know, in a perfect world, if a particular project, let's say we have a Costco coming to town, and we know that, you know, the Costco is going to impact a particular location, and then we do all the analysis, and they have to put in traffic signals, that's very, very straightforward. But when you have a shopping center that has multiple tenants, and each tenant has to come in and pay what their particular impacts would be, then that is where the fair share portion comes into play. So we collect a little bit from you, and then we go to the next tenant, we collect a little bit from them, and then when it seems like we've got 100% tenancy, now we have enough money to do some improvement. So that is another scenario that I think the commission needs to be aware of when it comes to fair share payment of fees.
Yes.
Mhm.
And when that is scheduled in the CIP, is there maybe a delineation, or is there like a parentheses that fair shares were captured on this project so that the public is aware what the city might be subsidizing in those particular CIP projects?
Yes, so our in lieu fee do have, you know, a specific amount that we collected, we kept track of. So that will be identified, you know, when it's contributing to a capital project, so that we will know the exact amount, you know, the in lieu fee is used to pay for the that particular portion of the capital projects. Yeah, and I will also kind of want to emphasize that we do want the developer to make all these on-site or off-site development, you know, as much as possible during the development, you know, not to, so the in lieu is really a kind of absolute fallback plan, you know, that's something that you really cannot do it at this time that we will resort to. So it's not something, you know, it's optional that you can take this or that. So it really is kind of, you know, something that there's just no other ways that this, you know, this is the, you know, the only resort that we can go to. And really, we only have so far have 9 projects, you know, that we have only 3 in lieu fees collected. The others are kind of in the collection process or in the process of determining the amount. So it's relatively a small, very small percentage of the projects that we will consider, you know, in lieu fees.
And fees are collected before permits are issued?
Correct. Yeah, construction permit.
Construction
issuance.
permits, yes. I just have one final question. I notice in the presentation, it states that the city has an unlimited amount of time before those fees are used, right? There's no, like, it has to be used within 6 years or it has to be used within 10 years. The city can push that project out indefinitely?
Well, I think it's really a matter of try to incorporate that into our capital projects to make it, you know, certainly we want to use it as quickly as possible. So, for example, you know, we have collected the in lieu fee from this Starbucks development, and we're actively looking at, you know, we have other projects that is 21st Street segment project, so we're looking to see if possibly we can add this segment to that contract, you know, so we are looking into every opportunity to include these, you know, in lieu fee funds into projects so we can actually get it done. But then, you know, again, you will have to kind of see what will line up, right? Because it has to, you know, the in lieu fees, it has a specific definite location, and then we'll have to see the other projects, again, what will make sense. Right?
When those other vacant lots get filled by development.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's, you know, in lieu fee typically is just for the frontage of a one development like Starbucks, but then we really try to achieve, you know, scale of efficiency economy, right? So when we do some rehab for the entire block or several blocks, and then that would be perfect to include that segment into that project. You know, otherwise it probably does not make economic sense to just do one small segment.
And then just let me add regarding the fair share contributions. Familiar with the Dutch Brothers going to go on hospitality by next to the Costco? That project was conditioned to install full-blown traffic signal at that location. So what happened, signal will be installed. The developer on the north side knew about this signal going in. He said, I want a piece of that. So the Quick Wash on the north side wants to have access through the traffic signal. So they shared the cost, and the city got the best out of both developers.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've been excited about this presentation, and I'm thankful for it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present this subject.
I have a couple of questions.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh, no worries. On the question on the in lieu fees, how does the city account for inflation? So I'm assuming the cost is determined at the time of the development. And as time goes on, the real cost of the project goes up. So curious how the city accounts for that.
Well, that is true. That's a very good point, because when we collect in lieu fees, that we do kind of collect it at the present value, say year 2024. It's true that, these projects may not be done till a few years down the road, but it's a kind of, we do actually in our spreadsheet that we have, this inflation factor built in, and then to see what it will cost, like say 5 years down the road. But it will be kind of challenging to say, collect that, 5 year down the road future value or that cost from the developer. So and then, our trust fund does earn some interest. So anyway, that just kind of, what the best we can do. Yeah.
Makes sense. And then a question on the traffic impact analysis. Does that just take into account motorized vehicles, or does it also take into account pedestrian and active transportation traffic?
If the location is indicated and shown on the non-motorized transportation plan that was issued by SBCTA, yes, we do install bike facilities, just like with the project that we, I think, presented to the commission for the university retail center on University and Varsity by the 215. That project was conditioned to install bike lanes. And again, there's improvements for the traffic signal at Varsity and University. So to answer your question, yes, there is elements that we can include to actively implement active transportation measures on these projects.
Great, thank you.
I have a comment, Madam Chair. So in the event the city deems a condition approval not feasible and an in lieu fee is collected, is there a way for the city to, I wouldn't say charge, but as future development goes around the development in question, is there a way for the city to implement or make a condition approval that future development pays their fair share after? Let me rephrase. In the event the city were deem, hey, this analysis or this traffic impact is feasible or not feasible, will the city take on costs to save on construction in real time?
Like right when the project is being developed.
So the project's being developed, we're doing construction, and it makes more sense right now in 2024 to widen out because we know we're developing ABC Road. Is there a way for the city to basically take on the cost and then charge future development as a condition for that work? If that makes sense. Because future development will benefit from that, from those improvements, and at that point they won't have an official a fair share. It'll be after the fact.
I think that's something we can consider. That is true, and that has a very good point. But that again, how logistically we set that up, arrange for that, because we do have a project right now. It's a Caltrans project, and they're going to be making improvements of this foothill avenue, and then it's going to be for several blocks. And then we have developments along that road, so we are in a regular meeting with the developers because our condition required them to underground the power posts, power lines. So that was kind of brought up, that how, we can work with Caltrans, because they do in their plan to relocate the power posts, so we're trying to make it work, how possibly we can, between Caltrans, the city, and the developers along that road. I mean, just right now, there's one development that's kind of ahead of all the others, ready to go into construction. So that's something that we're kind of thinking about it, how we could, if we do, say, be able to underground, for the entire, a whole block or several blocks, and then perhaps the future development will pay a fair share, in lieu fee costs. Yeah, so that's something that we could. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, we can consider.
Thank you for that answer. Sorry, I didn't mean to make it confusing, but I was trying to figure out and how it would work because I'm thinking about it. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay, all right. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chairperson, this is not a voting item, so you could just move on.
Oh, announcements. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yeah, director's reports. I'm sorry. Director's report?
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, good evening. It's my pleasure to welcome our new planning commissioners. It looks like we're getting a full house. We're missing one commissioner tonight, but we have 8 commissioners for the first time in a long time, at least since I've been here, so that's good. I'd like to welcome Commissioner Daly, representing District Number 1, and we'd like to welcome Commissioner Carrascos, representing District Number 7. We're glad to have you here. And on that note, I need to apologize because we had promised the commission we were going to have your laptops today. We do actually have the laptops, but we were not able to set them up before the meeting. So Jennifer has promised me that we would have them set up by the next meeting. Right, Jennifer? Yes. Right. So you can hold me to that. We would have your laptops at the next Planning Commission meeting. I also talked about having a kind of a Brown Act session with the commission. This would have been a wonderful meeting since we don't have a public hearing, but we didn't really coordinate that with Albert. But it is in my plans to have a Brown Act session with all the planning commissioners, especially now that we have almost a full house. I'd like to have a full house for now. And what a Brown Act session would do is kind of revive some of the rules and regulations of, what being a planning commissioner means, items about discussing items out of the commission and majority votes and things of that nature. I don't know if Albert wants to talk about some of those items in his regarding the Brown Act. Albert?
Thank you. Yes, I actually have a game that we can play that I've taken on the road to various organizations. It's Planning Commissioner Jeopardy, actually. And we cover a lot of topics, the Brown Act, due process, the First Amendment, conflicts of interest, etc. And so it's exactly what you think. It's the Jeopardy board. It's for points, and it's very fun. And I found that instead of talking at you and giving a PowerPoint, actually doing this game, which is very interactive, it actually helps retain the information. And so that's what I intend to do with all of you when we can find a mutually agreeable date to do that.
Thank you, Albert. That concludes my presentation, Madam Chair. For the meeting on June 11th, Elizabeth or Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, we have one potential item for that agenda on the 11th of June? I'm hearing yes. So if we only have one public hearing item on the 11th of June, would that be a good day for your Brown Act Jeopardy? So be prepared. No money to be waged. You don't have to bet $200 per question or anything like that. But so that concludes my presentation, Madam Chair.
I just wanted to take a second to introduce myself to colleagues on the commission. Casey Daly. I live in the First Ward. I live in downtown, so I'm very excited about all of the opportunities that are coming to us in downtown. I'm looking forward to that. I was doing the math. This is the fourth time that I've served on the Planning Commission under the fourth different elected official who has appointed me. So I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to see what's new in the city, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve. So thank you.